They say that nothing stings more than betrayal, especially when it's served with a smug smile. Meet Clara Thompson, a gentle heart and brilliant mind, whose world was shattered the day she discovered her husband's cruel taunts and secret affair. He mocked her pregnancy before his mistress, humiliating her in the very home they'd built together. Little did he know, the woman he dismissed held far greater power than he could ever imagine. Justice would soon shine a spotlight on the truth. In a courtroom charged with tension, the world learned that Clara was no ordinary woman. She was, in fact, a CEO. Clara Thompson was the kind of woman whose eyes sparkled with quiet determination. Even on her darkest days, raised in a modest home in Nebraska, she understood the value of hard work and honest living. Her parents, Timothy and Sarah Campbell, had invested their lives in a small family diner on the outskirts of Lincoln. Day after day, they instilled in their daughter a core belief: treat others with respect and kindness, no matter what storms life tosses in your path. It was in college that Clara first encountered Jonathan Thompson. He was a gregarious, ambitious young man with quick wit and a disarming smile. Jonathan's background was very different from Clara's. Born into a wealthy family in Los Angeles, he carried a sense of entitlement on his shoulders. He was used to getting what he wanted, often effortlessly. Yet there was something about Clara's sincerity that captivated him, and something about Jonathan's confidence that intrigued her. From the start, Clara sensed Jonathan craved success above all else. Sometimes, she even worried he confused ambition with greed. Yet for reasons she couldn't quite name, she trusted him to respect her choices. After all, he promised her the world. She was young, in love, and hopeful. In the first few years of marriage, Clara and Jonathan found themselves building the typical suburban life. Clara worked as a mid-level marketing executive at a boutique firm called Elysian Concepts. Jonathan, always bouncing from one project to another, styled himself as an entrepreneur. He jumped from real estate deals to tech startups, always proclaiming to have found the next big thing. When they moved to Chicago, Clara took on a more senior role in a larger advertising agency, Dahl & Ross, to support them financially. Even then, subtle warning signs emerged. Jonathan's once charming confidence grew into arrogance. He would complain that Clara's job was not enough, and that she should be doing more to prove she was worth his time and love. When her father died suddenly from a heart attack, Jonathan's support was strangely tepid. Instead of comforting Clara in her grief, he ranted about the inheritance not being substantial. That day, though her heart was still in love, Clara felt the first crack in her faith toward Jonathan. Years passed in a blur of overtime hours, strategic marketing meetings, and mounting tension at home. Clara's mother had moved in briefly, only to find Jonathan cold and dismissive. Sarah Campbell, with a mother's protective intuition, tried to warn her daughter that Jonathan's behavior was growing unhealthy. Clara brushed it off, determined to see the best in him. Then came the day that would change everything. Clara realized her period was late, very late. One pregnancy test later, and her heart soared in both excitement and trepidation. She was going to be a mother. Despite the strains in her marriage, she believed this news could reignite the love that once bonded them. With trembling hands, she prepared a small gift box with the positive test and a pair of baby booties. She waited for Jonathan to come home. That evening, Jonathan strode in, complaining about traffic and how the barista got his coffee order wrong again, heart pounding. Clara presented him with the box. He opened it with a puzzled frown. When realization dawned, he blinked in surprise. Clara hoped to see excitement flash across his face. Maybe tears of joy. Instead, his shoulders sagged, and his mouth thinned into a tight line. "You should have told me you were late," he muttered. Do we even have the finances for a baby right now? Clara's heart sank. She forced a smile, pushing aside the sting, hoping that he would come around once the initial shock wore off over the next few weeks. Jonathan's behavior turned even colder. He spent more time out networking and less time talking to Clara. It seemed every conversation ended in an argument about money or his new business ventures. His phone buzzed incessantly, and he was evasive about who was calling. Clara's anxiety grew with her pregnancy. Though she kept up her duties at Dahl and Ross, the stress was taking a toll on her health. One evening, Clara decided to wait up for Jonathan. Midnight came and went. Yet he still hadn't returned. Worried, she called his phone. It went straight to voicemail. She tried to distract herself, reorganizing baby items in the nursery, a small sunlit room they'd set aside. At nearly 2 a.m., Jonathan stumbled in, smelling of expensive wine and perfume that wasn't hers. Clara asked where he'd been. He simply brushed her off, claiming late-night business meeting. But the bright red lipstick stain near his collar told a different story. That night, Clara felt a silent devastation, yet part of her refused to believe the worst. She wanted proof, not accusations born of suspicion. A week later, while doing laundry, Clara found a credit card statement in Jonathan's pants pocket, a fancy restaurant reservation in the name of April. Donovan jumped out at her. The date matched one of Jonathan's networking nights. Heart pounding. Clara looked up the restaurant Lumiere Lounge, an upscale romantic spot known for candlelit dinners and velvet-upholstered booths. There was no mistaking the nature of this evening. Confronting Jonathan, Clara demanded an explanation. He sneered, rolling his eyes. "Are you prying into my finances now?" He spat. "You should focus on not stressing the baby. My private life is my business. His private life." The words spun around in her head, unleashing a storm of heartbreak. Her once warm and secure home now felt like a battlefield. The happy future she'd envisioned with her husband disintegrated each time he walked out the door. Unable to keep her hurt bottled up, Clara confided in her co-worker and friend, Lisa Harrington, a brilliant advertising director at Dahl and Ross. Lisa listened gravely, urging Clara to protect herself emotionally and financially. "You've got to look out for you and the baby," Lisa said, tucking a stray hair behind her ear. "Don't let him walk over you. You're stronger than you think." Soon enough, Clara discovered that April Donovan was not only Jonathan's mistress, but also a rumored socialite from a wealthy family in Boston. The rumor mill suggested that April craved attention and never settled for less than luxury. In Jonathan, she'd found a kindred spirit who adored status and flaunted extravagance. Clara confronted him again. This time, she threatened to walk out if he didn't stop seeing April. Jonathan responded coldly. "Where would you go? You can't raise a kid alone, and you certainly can't keep up your lifestyle without me." The cruelty in his eyes sliced through Clara's heart. As the pregnancy advanced, Clara tried to focus on her health, but the emotional turmoil weighed heavily. Her obstetrician, Dr. Remy Hartfield, worried about Clara's elevated blood pressure and told her to avoid stress as much as possible. "High stress can lead to complications," Clara, the doctor said gently. Clara nodded. But how could she find peace when her husband was parading around with another woman? The final straw came one weekend. Jonathan claimed he had an urgent meeting with potential investors. Clara, feeling uneasy, decided to quietly follow him in a taxi. He headed straight to the Four Seasons Hotel, where a lavish charity gala was taking place. Slipping inside, Clara spotted Jonathan and April in a cozy corner, locked in an intimate conversation. Clara's heart hammered in her chest as she saw him lean in to kiss April. She marched up to them. Jonathan froze, eyes flicking with irritation rather than guilt. April looked Clara up and down with a smirk. "This must be the wife," she said in a mocking tone. Before Clara could speak, Jonathan sneered. "Don't start a scene." "Clara, you're embarrassing yourself." Then, with horrifying callousness, he announced to a few onlookers nearby, "She's pregnant, sure, but let's be honest, her salary can't even support her own unborn child properly." He laughed, and April joined in the cruel chorus. Trembling with anger and humiliation, Clara turned and fled the hotel, tears scalding her cheeks. Everything inside her screamed that this was not only a betrayal, but an assault on her dignity. She wasn't just fighting for her marriage, she was fighting for her self-respect. Early the next morning, Clara received an unexpected text from a blocked number. "I'm sorry for how you were treated. He's not worth it. You deserve better." Shocked Clara reread the message, suspecting it might be from April or someone close to Jonathan. But as quickly as it had come, the number disappeared. It felt strangely comforting that someone, somewhere, had recognized how she'd been wronged. Wary but curious, Clara confided in Lisa again. Lisa insisted she had to take control of her own life over lunch at a small cafe near Dahl and Ross. Lisa gently took Clara's hands and said, "Clara, you're brilliant at what you do. Your presentations are top-notch. You have the entire skill set to start your own venture, if you wanted. You don't need Jonathan's approval or his money, especially not after how he's treating you." Clara sipped her coffee, thinking of how she'd dreamt of running her own marketing firm one day. She had never seriously considered it before, mainly due to family obligations and the notion that Jonathan might not support such an endeavor. The idea that she could step out from behind his shadow and pursue something on her own set a tiny ember of hope glowing inside her. That ember caught a spark when fate intervened in the form of a phone call. An old college professor's doctor. Norman Drake reached out to Clara about a friend who was seeking top-level marketing expertise for a new tech product launch. The friend, Michael Harrington, was the founder of Ascension Apps, a startup with significant investor backing. They wanted a fresh marketing strategy and were willing to pay handsomely for the right talent. Clara saw an opportunity. With Lisa's encouragement, Clara quietly began consulting with Ascension Apps during evenings and weekends. She took meticulous notes, mapped out marketing campaigns, and sketched potential brand identities. Despite her blossoming pregnancy, she poured her heart into the project, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Jonathan remained oblivious. Too consumed with parading around with April by day, Clara still put on a brave face at Dahl and Ross, though she knew she might soon have to part ways if this consulting gig turned into something bigger. Unbeknownst to Jonathan, each paycheck from her consulting work went into a separate bank account. She was preparing for a future on her own. One day, Michael Harrington called Clara in for an urgent meeting. The campaign proposals she'd drafted had wowed his investors, and they wanted her full-time as Chief Marketing Officer. The compensation package was substantial, complete with a generous sign-on bonus and stock options. Clara's heart soared, but she also hesitated. She was pregnant, dealing with an unfaithful husband, and uncertain if she could juggle so many changes at once. But Michael didn't waver. "Clara, your skills are unique and your insights are unmatched. We need you," he said emphatically. Feeling a surge of self-confidence, Clara accepted the position. This was her chance to break free from Jonathan's toxic control. Over dinner that evening, she mustered the courage to tell Jonathan about her new job offer, hoping for some semblance of support. Instead, his response was scornful. "A startup tech nonsense. That's a joke. You're too naive to see when you're being used." His dismissive attitude only fueled Clara's resolve. She smiled politely, retreated to her room, and resolved to finalize her plans to leave him the moment she felt secure in her new role. She also vowed to keep her unborn child safe from Jonathan's negativity at all costs. The tension in the Thompson household escalated day by day. Jonathan, oblivious to Clara's growing independence, continued to flaunt his affair. He posted pictures of lavish outings with April on social media, though he never explicitly mentioned her identity. Friends began to ask Clara awkward questions, and she deflected them with carefully measured responses. She refused to let the public see her pain, but inside she seethed. At Ascension Apps, Clara threw herself into work. Her early marketing campaigns were a roaring success, drawing attention from major tech blogs and even mainstream media outlets. Investors praised her creativity and leadership. Michael Harrington, impressed by her management style, began hinting that he wanted to groom her for an even higher executive position, perhaps CEO of a newly formed spin-off brand. Clara felt the ground shifting under her feet in the best way possible. Her life was about to change yet again, but this time she would be in the driver's seat. Meanwhile, Jonathan had no clue about the magnitude of Clara's achievements. He only saw that she was wasting time at a startup. One evening he came home in a foul mood, reeking of whiskey. April had apparently complained that Jonathan was not fulfilling promises of giving her a glamorous life. He directed all his frustration at Clara. She was sitting at the kitchen table, reviewing documents for an upcoming product launch, when Jonathan stormed in. "You're spending all your time at that worthless job," he yelled, slamming a cabinet door. "Look at this house. It's not even clean. And you think you can handle a baby?" Clara's patience snapped. She stood up, faced him directly, and declared, "I'm doing what I need to do for me and our child. If you don't like it, that's your problem." Jonathan laughed bitterly. "Our child, don't kid yourself. You know you can't raise it alone. You need me." He advanced toward her with a menacing glare, terrified for her safety. "And the babies?" Clara stepped away, heart pounding. Suddenly her phone rang, cutting the tension. It was Michael Harrington calling about an urgent investor update. Jonathan scoffed at the interruption and stormed out, leaving Clara trembling but resolute. The time for living in fear was over. In the weeks that followed, Clara quietly prepared her exit strategy. She kept a journal of every threatening or humiliating statement Jonathan made. She also documented his repeated absences and compiled screenshots of his social media posts with April. Her friend Lisa advised her to consult an attorney, so Clara visited Rebecca Henderson at a respected law firm, Johnson & Friedman. Rebecca was known for her fierce advocacy on behalf of wronged spouses. Rebecca listened patiently as Clara poured out her story, tears brimming in her eyes. "Your safety and your baby's safety are paramount," Rebecca said firmly. "We'll file a restraining order if needed, and we'll ensure you receive proper spousal support. But first, I want to understand your financial situation and your new job thoroughly." Clara disclosed her new position and how her salary was rapidly increasing alongside the stock options. She revealed her plan to leave Jonathan once she found a new place to live. Rebecca assured her that everything could be arranged discreetly. The attorney urged her to stay cautious. People like Jonathan can become volatile when they realize their control is slipping, she warned. Despite Clara's attempts at discretion, rumors eventually reached Jonathan. He found out she was earning far more than he'd assumed. One day, rummaging through mail on the kitchen counter, he came across a bank statement for Clara's separate account. The hefty deposit from Ascension Apps stunned him. enraged at the prospect of losing financial control, he confronted Clara yet again. "You think you can just sneak around hoarding money?" he snarled, waving the bank statement in front of her. "Who do you think you are?" Clara didn't cower this time. Slowly standing, she met his glare head-on. "I'm someone who's tired of being treated like dirt. I'm building a future for me and our baby, with or without you." There was a moment of stunned silence. Clara could see confusion in Jonathan's eyes, as though he'd never imagined a scenario where she could thrive independently. He spat a bitter laugh and stormed off. But for Clara, that fleeting exchange was a victory. She had found her voice, and with it, a sense of freedom. The rain pattered softly against the windows of Clara's condo, painting streaks across the glass, as if nature itself mourned with her. She sat at her small dining table, surrounded by paperwork, her swollen belly pressing gently against the edge. Gabriel, though still unnamed, kicked from within, as if reminding her that he was there. A life forming a future coming. Clara rubbed her stomach instinctively, letting out a tired sigh. The weeks had been long and heavy, between late-night strategy calls for Ascension apps and the creeping anxiety of her crumbling marriage. She hadn't had a moment to exhale, to feel anything beyond duty and survival. Every step forward felt like wading through mud. And yet she kept moving. Then the call came. Her phone buzzed quietly. Michael Harrington. The screen read. She hesitated. It wasn't a scheduled meeting. Was something wrong? "Hello." She answered her voice, cautious but steady. Clara Michael's voice came through warm and deliberate. "I need to speak with you in person, if you can manage." Within the hour, she sat across from him in the Ascension conference room, clutching a thermos of decaf coffee as she fought to still her trembling hands. The atmosphere was different, more focused, more intense. Michael wasn't his usual jovial self. He looked as if he was about to drop a bombshell. "I'll be direct," he said, resting his elbows on the table. "Your work has been exceptional. Investors are beyond impressed. We've decided to launch a new subsidiary, Ascension Creative, and we want you to run it." Clara blinked. "Run it." He smiled as CEO. Time seemed to freeze. The words hovered in the air like snowflakes, suspended mid-fall. Clara stared at him, her mind struggling to catch up. "You want me to be CEO?" she repeated slowly, as if trying the title on for size. Her voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. Michael nodded. "Yes, you're not just good at what you do. Clara, you lead, you inspire. You've transformed this brand in weeks. Imagine what you could do with full authority." Her eyes stung unexpectedly. No one had spoken to her like this in years. Not since college, perhaps. Not since before Jonathan. Not since she was simply Clara Campbell, a woman full of ambition and belief. But she began placing a protective hand over her belly. "I'm pregnant. I'm about to be a single mother. This is so much. What if I can't handle it all?" Michael leaned forward, sincerity softening his tone. "Clara, your pregnancy doesn't make you less capable. If anything, it shows your resilience. You've juggled more under pressure than most people ever will. You don't have to say yes right now. The announcement can wait until after your baby is born. But I wanted you to know we see you, we believe in you." She covered her mouth with her hand. Overcome, emotions rushed in a tidal wave of disbelief, gratitude, fear, and something deeper, validation. For years, she had been made to feel small, like her dreams were too loud, too inconvenient. And now someone was handing her the keys to a future she thought she'd lost. Tears slipped down her cheeks silently. She didn't try to stop them. "I'll do it," she whispered, her voice full of quiet strength. "I'll accept," Michael smiled. "Then let's build something incredible together." That night, back in her condo, Clara stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, for the first time in what felt like forever. She didn't feel like she was just surviving. She was becoming. Jonathan didn't know it yet, but the woman he thought he'd broken was already rising. One decision, one heartbeat at a time. And soon, the world would call her something new. CEO. Unfortunately, Jonathan would not let her slip away so easily. During her 8th month of pregnancy, Clara came home one last time to pack her belongings. Jonathan was in the living room, smirking. April was there too, perched on the couch like she owned the place. Clara's heart pounded at the brazen display of disrespect. "You think you can just leave me without consequences?" Jonathan taunted April. "And I have decided to get married once we finalize our divorce. And guess what? There won't be much left for you in the settlement. My father's lawyer is the best in the city," April giggled. "Yes, Clara, if that's your name, don't be too upset. Jonathan told me your child was unplanned anyway." Her words dripped with sarcasm and cruelty. Clara's cheeks burned with anger, but she refused to respond with the same venom. She quietly picked up her suitcase. Before walking out, she leveled a calm stare at Jonathan. "I hope you're happy with the choices you've made. One day you'll realize what you lost." With that, she shut the door on him, and the life they once shared, Clara settled into her temporary condo, a stark yet comforting contrast to the lavish, tension-filled house she left behind. Each day she prepared for the birth of her child, while juggling the responsibilities of her demanding job. Lisa came by, regularly helping to assemble baby furniture and pack a hospital bag. During these visits, they shared stories of the old days, letting laughter replace pain. On a breezy afternoon, she officially filed for divorce with Rebecca's help. The paperwork was straightforward, but emotionally heavy. Clara was ready to fight for custody of her child and ensure their future was secure. Rebecca was optimistic, given Clara's stable job, independent finances, and a documented history of Jonathan's mistreatment. Shortly after Jonathan's attorney, a slick operator named Marcus Delgado, filed a counter-petition. They contested nearly everything from spousal support to custody arrangements, painted Clara as unstable and unable to cope with the rigors of single parenthood. Jonathan wanted full custody, or at least enough to reduce child support obligations. Clara reeled with disbelief at the gall of it all. But she didn't panic. She had prepared thoroughly, saving every piece of evidence. The court date loomed just a few weeks away. Tensions rose, but Clara remained focused. She rehearsed her statements with Rebecca. She refused to stoop to Jonathan's level of pettiness or name-calling. Her strategy was simple: present the truth. Life, however, had one more surprise in store. Before the trial, Clara went into labor unexpectedly at 36 weeks, alone in her condo. She felt the first contraction tear through her abdomen. Fear gripped her. She wasn't fully prepared. She grabbed her phone and called Lisa, who rushed over immediately and dialed 911. The ambulance arrived, and Clara was whisked to Mercy Hospital. Hours later, in a whirlwind of pain and hope, Clara gave birth to a baby boy whom she named Gabriel, holding him in her arms. Clara felt a surge of protective love. This tiny infant was her reason for fighting her beacon of hope in the darkest storm. Gabriel came out slightly premature, but healthy enough to breathe on his own. The doctors kept him in the neonatal unit for a few days to ensure no complications arose, Jonathan was conspicuously absent. He didn't visit the hospital at all. When word finally reached him, April apparently discouraged him from going, complaining that Clara was trying to trap him with emotional manipulation. So Jonathan stayed away, further proving to Clara that she was doing the right thing by leaving him. Once Gabriel stabilized, Clara took him home to the condo where Lisa had baby-proofed the essentials. Late nights turned into early mornings as Clara navigated the exhaustion and bliss of new motherhood. Her body ached from delivery, and she struggled to breastfeed at first. But each success felt like a small triumph. Rebecca advised her to postpone the court hearing given her medical situation. However, Jonathan and his legal team pressed forward, hoping to catch Clara at a weak moment. Reluctantly, Clara agreed to proceed, trusting that her documentation and professional legal support would prevail. Within 3 weeks of Gabriel's birth, the court date arrived. A crisp morning sunlight lit the steps of the Cook County Courthouse in downtown Chicago. Nervous energy fluttered in Clara's stomach as she walked in with Rebecca, baby Gabriel, safely at home with Lisa. To her left, she spotted Jonathan in an expensive suit, arm in arm with April, who wore a smug grin. Marcus Delgado stood near them, scanning documents and nodding in self-assured confidence. The courtroom was a formal, yet tense space. Family court cases were being heard one after another. Finally, their case was called Thompson versus Thompson. Clara's heart pounded as she approached the bench. The presiding judge was the Honorable Alicia Stone, a well-respected figure known for her zero tolerance for deception. Rebecca presented Clara's case meticulously. She outlined Jonathan's infidelity, emotional abuse, and lack of concern for Clara's well-being during pregnancy. She highlighted Clara's stable income and supportive friends. Clara handed over documented evidence of Jonathan's late nights credit card statements and social media posts. Marcus tried to interrupt with claims that Clara was emotionally unstable, referencing postpartum challenges. He argued that Jonathan was willing to provide a luxurious lifestyle for the child, and insisted that the baby's best interests lay with a father who had significant financial resources. Significant financial resources, Rebecca retorted. Are we discussing Jonathan Thompson's personal finances or that of his father? My client has proven her own professional success. Time and again, Jonathan took the stand, painting himself as a victim. He claimed Clara shut him out, refused to communicate, and was obsessed with her own career. He even implied that the paternity of the child could be questioned, though he offered no evidence to support this wild assertion. The judge frowned at the baseless allegation. When it was Clara's turn, she spoke calmly, hands clasped tightly in front of her. She described Jonathan's dismissive attitude toward her pregnancy, his public humiliation of her, and his ongoing affair with April Donovan. She only provided facts, never once stooping to personal attacks. The judge's gaze softened at Clara's composure and the heartbreak she'd endured. Then came a dramatic twist. Marcus Delgado unexpectedly called April Donovan to the stand. April swanned forward in a designer dress, flipping her hair confidently. She claimed that Jonathan was a loving partner who had rescued her from a toxic environment. She alleged that Clara was the real manipulator, and that Clara had withheld intimacy from Jonathan, driving him to find solace elsewhere. Rebecca objected, pointing out that April's testimony had no direct bearing on child custody or spousal support. The judge allowed her to continue briefly, but April's statements quickly devolved into petty complaints about Clara's attitude. Judge Stone looked unimpressed, as if she recognized a performance. Finally, the judge asked a straightforward question. Ms. Donovan, are you aware of the professional status of Mrs. Thompson? April blinked in confusion. Professional status. She's just an employee at some small firm, I think. A faint smile tugged at the judge's lips, She then turned to Clara. "Mrs. Thompson, would you kindly inform the court of your current position?" The courtroom air was thick with tension, every breath laced with judgment. The sterile walls, the rustling of legal papers, the sharp tap of a pen against a wooden bench. It all seemed distant to Clara, like background noise in a nightmare she couldn't quite wake from. She sat upright, back straight. Despite the fatigue of new motherhood and weeks of legal warfare, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Across from her, Jonathan slouched in his seat like a bored schoolboy, barely hiding his irritation. April was perched next to him, all gloss and performance, tossing her hair as if the courtroom were a runway. Their attorney, Marcus Delgado, stood with the confidence of someone who believed the show was already won. Then came the twist no one expected. Delgado, with the smug air of someone about to deliver a theatrical coup, called April Donovan to the witness stand. A few murmurs stirred in the room. Clara kept her face composed, but her insides twisted. She wasn't afraid of April's words. She was tired of the lies. April sauntered to the front like she owned the place. Dressed to impress, she looked like someone preparing for a fashion shoot, not a legal hearing. She began her testimony with well-rehearsed disdain, calling Jonathan her savior, painting Clara as cold, controlling, distant. She twisted the truth like a knife layer by layer. But as the judge listened, Clara could see it. Judge Stone's expression didn't change, but her eyes narrowed ever so slightly. She was watching, reading beyond the surface. April's words began to falter, drifting from accusation to pettiness. Complaints about Clara's tone, her attitude, her lack of femininity. It was no longer testimony, it was theatre, and the performance was unraveling. Then came the moment that shattered it all, Miss. Donovan Judge Stone interrupted coolly. "Are you aware of Mrs. Thompson's professional status?" April blinked. "Professional status?" "Yes." The judge repeated her voice, laced with something between curiosity and control. "Her occupation." April let out a light laugh. "She works at some company, marketing or something, I think." Her voice was full of smug dismissal. That's when Judge Stone turned to Clara with a deliberate, steady gaze. "Mrs. Thompson, would you kindly inform the court of your current position?" Clara felt her pulse spike. For a moment, the room was silent. Every eye turned to her. She glanced at Rebecca, her lawyer, who gave a tiny, reassuring nod. Clara straightened her shoulders. "I'm currently the Chief Marketing Officer at Ascension Apps," she said clearly. "And I've accepted a position as the Chief Executive Officer of their new subsidiary, Ascension Creative. The paperwork is awaiting finalization." There was a pause, a full, breathtaking pause. It was like someone had cut the sound out of the room. Then the reaction began. Jonathan's face froze in pure disbelief. He turned his head sharply, mouth slightly ajar, like he had misheard. April stiffened her painted-on confidence. Melting, Delgado rifled through his documents like they might magically contradict Clara's statement. Judge Stone leaned forward. Intrigued CEO, she repeated with interest. "Do you have documentation to confirm this appointment?" Clara nodded, reaching calmly into her case file. "Yes, Your Honor. I brought a copy in case it was relevant." She handed the signed letter across the courtroom. Her hands didn't shake. "Not anymore." The judge flipped through the documents with a quiet intensity. A faint smile touched the corners of her mouth. Not amusement, but recognition. "Respect, Mrs. Thompson," she said at last. "Your achievements are remarkable. This not only reflects on your professional capabilities, but speaks volumes about your ability to provide a stable, enriched environment for your child. Clara's throat tightened with emotion, but she didn't let it show. This wasn't just about a title. It was about everything that came before, every sleepless night, every insult swallowed, every doubt she had silenced so she could survive. And now she was no longer just surviving. She was standing tall. She was being seen. Across the aisle, Jonathan looked pale. The man who once mocked her salary, her dreams, her very motherhood, was now staring at a reality where she had outpaced him in every way. Clara didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The truth had spoken for her. All eyes turned to Jonathan. His bravado crumbled, replaced by an anxious flicker. He had never imagined that Clara, the woman he belittled, was scaling corporate heights. He could only dream of. The color drained from his face as the reality of her power and earning potential set in April's composure cracked next CEO. "That's impossible," she exclaimed, casting a bewildered glance at Jonathan. "You told me she was just scraping by." Jonathan hissed at her to be quiet, but it was too late. The entire courtroom watched the cracks in their facade grow wider. Rebecca seized the moment. "Your Honor, it's clear that Mr. Thompson's portrayal of my client's financial situation is inaccurate. Contrary to their claims that Clara is unstable or unemployed, she is in a position of significant responsibility and income. This alone contradicts the notion that Mr. Thompson should have majority custody or lower child support obligations." Silence fell once more over the courtroom, but this time it was not the quiet of anticipation. It was the stillness of reckoning. Clara sat poised, her heart pounding softly like a distant drum. She kept her gaze forward, not daring to look at Jonathan. She didn't need to. She could feel his energy unraveling, anger cloaked in fear, entitlement collapsing under the weight of reality. Judge Alicia Stone adjusted her glasses and looked over the file in front of her once more. Her eyes flicked to Jonathan, then to Clara, then down to the stack of evidence financial statements. Social media screenshots documented neglect. And now the CEO confirmation letter that had shifted the entire courtroom dynamic like a tectonic plate snapping into place. When the judge spoke, her voice was measured calm, but behind it was a quiet steel. "The court has reviewed all submitted materials and testimony," she began, Mrs. O. "Thompson has demonstrated both through documentation and witness accounts that she has acted in the best interest of her child from the moment she became aware of her pregnancy." Clara felt her breath catch. Every part of her was clenched, waiting, hoping. She has shown remarkable professional stability, emotional composure, and clear, consistent efforts to protect and prepare for her child's future. Jonathan shifted in his seat, frowning. April's smugness had vanished. She sat rigid and silent, her nails digging into the strap of her designer purse. Conversely, Judge Stone continued turning her eyes directly to Jonathan. "Mr. Thompson has provided no credible evidence of stability, nor has he adequately rebutted the claims of emotional neglect, infidelity, or financial recklessness. Furthermore, the attempt to question the paternity of the child without basis or proof demonstrates a troubling pattern of deflection and irresponsibility." Jonathan opened his mouth to object, but the judge raised her hand, sharp and final. "My decision is as follows," she said, her voice now echoing like the drop of a stone into a still lake. "Full legal custody is awarded to Mrs. Clara Thompson, Tess. Thompson is granted visitation rights as outlined by the court schedule and is required to contribute to child support based on a revised financial evaluation, including half of all medical and educational expenses. A sharp inhale escaped Clara before she could stop it. Her fingers gripped the edge of her seat. It was real. Then came the final blow. Not from Clara, but from the bench. Judge Stone turned to Jonathan, her gaze unflinching. "I advise you, Mr. Thompson, to reflect on the role you play in your son's life, not in terms of what you believe you're owed, but what you are responsible for. Being a father is not a title. It is a duty." Jonathan looked stunned, as if hearing those words from someone he couldn't dismiss had finally pierced his armor. The judge added, almost as an afterthought, but with the gravity of a closing door. "Should Mrs. Thompson wish to pursue additional damages related to emotional distress, she is entitled to do so in a separate civil suit. This case is now concluded." Bang! The gavel fell. And just like that, it was done. For a long second, Clara remained frozen, not from shock, but from something deeper. Relief. Vindication. A swell of something she hadn't felt in so long. Freedom. Rebecca touched her arm gently. "You did it," she whispered. Clara turned to her, blinking back tears. "We did it," she said. Across the aisle, Jonathan stood up too fast, nearly knocking over his chair. His face was flushed, his expression twisted with disbelief and fury. He no longer had power to act on. April didn't move. She stared ahead, as if trying to rewrite the past few minutes with her mind alone. But the truth had been spoken. Justice had chosen its side. Clara gathered her files, straightened her spine, and walked out of the courtroom. Not broken, not bitter, but reborn. The moment the gavel struck, a surge of relief and triumph rushed through Clara. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she thanked Rebecca, who nodded with a small smile. Jonathan hurried out of the courtroom, muttering curses under his breath, while April trailed behind, looking shell-shocked. Outside, reporters from local tabloids who had caught wind of a juicy divorce case snapped photos of the meltdown. Clara shielded her face and politely declined to comment. In the hallway, Lisa met Clara with open arms. The victory was monumental, but Clara felt a tinge of sorrow for what she had endured to get here. She squeezed Lisa's hand, whispering, "We did it." And Lisa replied, "No, you did it. You stood up for yourself and your child." Over the following weeks, Jonathan frantically tried to negotiate with Clara privately. He offered to reconcile if she called off the divorce proceedings, mostly in an attempt to salvage his finances. Clara calmly refused. She had endured too much trauma to even consider going back. She explained that any communication from now on would go through Rebecca and revolve solely around visitation for baby Gabriel. April, on the other hand, publicly distanced herself from Jonathan after the humiliating courtroom debacle. Rumors circulated that she left town to focus on her own well-being. Jonathan, bereft of both Mistress and the illusions of grandeur, found himself alone. Clara resumed her duties at Ascension Apps, balancing motherhood with the demands of her position. True to his word, Michael Harrington publicly announced her appointment as CEO of Ascension Creative in a press release that garnered national attention. Suddenly, Clara found herself invited to speak at conferences about women in leadership, balancing family and career, and overcoming personal adversity. With each new responsibility, Clara remembered the core values instilled by her parents: humility, kindness, and fairness. She assembled a team that reflected diversity and ethical business practices. Overnight, her story turned into an inspirational headline. Rising from betrayal to break barriers in tech months rolled by, and Clara found a rhythm in her new life. Gabriel thrived, growing into a bright-eyed baby who giggled at every silly face Lisa made. Despite her heartbreak, Clara discovered that her capacity for love had only deepened. She quietly dated a fellow executive she met at a marketing conference, David Chang, a down-to-earth man who treated her with genuine respect. Though cautious, Clara allowed herself to hope that a healthy relationship was still possible. Jonathan, meanwhile, spiraled. The child support payments and his failing business ventures forced him to downsize his lifestyle. He lost his swanky apartment and had to move into a modest rental. The occasional newspaper snippet would mention his drunken outbursts or unpaid debts. Clara felt no pleasure in his downfall, only a sense of peace in knowing she was free from it all. Late one evening, Clara was rocking Gabriel to sleep when her phone buzzed. It was Jonathan. In a moment of hesitation, she almost ignored it. Something compelled her to answer. The voice on the other end sounded hollow, distant. "Clara, I'm sorry," he said, his words slurred. "I made mistakes. I lost everything. April's gone, my investors pulled out. I just need to see my son." Clara closed her eyes, swallowing a wave of pity. "Jonathan, if you want to see Gabriel, we can arrange something official through the court guidelines. I hope you get the help you need." Her calm tone unsettled him. "Clara, please, don't hang up. She gently ended the call. She would not return to that dark place. She had moved on, and Gabriel was her priority. A few Sundays later, Clara held a small baptism ceremony for Gabriel at the local church, a simple, joyous event. Surrounded by close friends, Lisa, Michael Harrington, David Chung, and a few relatives, she celebrated her baby's life and her newfound independence. Jonathan was not invited, but he showed up unannounced anyway, lingering at the back of the church. Clara caught sight of him, just as she handed Gabriel over to the pastor. A flash of sadness washed over her, but she steeled herself and focused on the blessing of her child. After the ceremony, Jonathan approached her. "May I hold him?" he asked quietly. Clara took a breath, then allowed a brief moment for father and son to connect. Jonathan's eyes watered as he looked at the tiny face of Gabriel. "I'm sorry," he whispered again. But Clara said nothing. She gently took Gabriel back, nodding at Lisa to accompany Jonathan outside. Though she harbored no illusions about Jonathan's capacity to change, she wanted Gabriel to understand in the future that she had acted with decency and mercy. The legal divorce itself was a formality after the custody ruling. By the time the papers were signed, Clara felt more relief than sadness. Rebecca congratulated her on standing strong through a painful ordeal. Clara realized that her life was on an upward trajectory she never could have imagined. A year earlier, free from the shackles of a toxic relationship, Jonathan left an apology letter in her mailbox. But Clara never responded. She folded it neatly, tucked it away in a drawer, unsure if she would ever open that chapter again. For now, her heart needed time to heal and focus on what mattered: her son and her career, both blossoming under her careful guidance. Clara's story reached a peak when she was named Entrepreneur of the Year by a prominent women in business organization. The award ceremony held at the Hyatt Regency was a grand affair. She arrived wearing a simple yet elegant black gown. Greeting a host of colleagues and well-wishers, Lisa took on babysitting duties for Gabriel, ensuring Clara could fully soak in her achievement. As Clara stepped onto the stage to accept her award, she recalled every hurdle she had to leap: Jonathan's mocking words, April's sneers, the court battles, and the fear of single motherhood. Yet there she stood, unstoppable. She dedicated her award to her parents, Sarah and the late Timothy Campbell, for teaching her resilience. She also made a special nod to Gabriel, whose mere existence had given her the strength to rise above the storm. In the months that followed, Clara's life took on a beautiful normalcy. She developed marketing strategies for high-profile clients, traveled for conferences, and spent quality time with Gabriel David. And she grew closer, gradually weaving a supportive partnership that respected each other's histories. At work, Ascension Creative soared. They launched innovative campaigns that garnered major awards, attracting top-tier clients worldwide. Clara's leadership style, empathetic yet firm, set a new standard in the industry. She became a mentor for young women, especially single mothers who needed encouragement to chase their dreams. Jonathan drifted in and out of therapy. He made sporadic attempts to see Gabriel, abiding by the visitation schedule. Clara allowed it, believing Gabriel deserved to know his biological father, despite Jonathan's flaws. But her heart had long healed from the illusions of romantic reconciliation. She had found peace in forging her own path, free from Jonathan's cruelty. One day out of the blue, April, Donovan reached out through social media, sending Clara a short message. "I'm sorry for everything. I wish you the best." Clara read it, paused for a moment, and decided to let it go unanswered. She had no desire to reopen old wounds. The best revenge, after all, was living well. Before she knew it, Gabriel had turned 1 year old. Clara hosted a small birthday party in her condo, decorating the living room with pastel balloons. She watched her baby boy smash cake between his fingers with pure delight. Everyone who had stood by her side, Lisa Rebecca, Michael David, filled the room with warmth and love. At one point, Clara stood off to the side, tears of gratitude sparkling in her eyes. She could hardly believe how far she'd come from a humiliated pregnant wife to a confident CEO and caring mother. This was the life she had fought for, full of hope, surrounded by genuine people who celebrated her success, rather than tore it down. A few weeks later, in the calm after the birthday celebration, Clara sat at her desk, in Ascension Creative's sleek new offices. She gazed out the window at the bustling Chicago skyline. A sense of purpose filled her. She pressed a button on her intercom to call her assistant. "Yes, Mrs. Thompson." "Sorry, Ms." Thompson, the assistant, corrected. Remembering the divorce, Clara smiled. "Clara is fine." She said she'd long since dropped Jonathan's last name in official documents, reverting to her maiden name. "Campbell, could you schedule a meeting with the design team for Monday afternoon?" "Yes, Ms. Campbell," her assistant replied. "Congratulations again on the big contract with Syntec. You're doing amazing things here." Clara thanked her and leaned back in her chair. The city gleamed in the afternoon sun, a metaphor for her own bright horizon. She'd survived betrayal, heartbreak, and public humiliation. In the end, she discovered her own power. She wasn't merely the scorned wife she was. Clara Campbell, CEO, a loving mother and an unstoppable force. Thank you for joining me on this emotional roller coaster of betrayal, resilience, and ultimate triumph. Clara Campbell's journey reminds us that no matter how dark the night may seem, dawn always breaks with new possibilities. She overcame humiliation, stood her ground, and rose to become a powerhouse in her field, all while embracing the joy of motherhood. Her story shines a light on the importance of self-respect and staying true to one's values. It challenges us to question the limits placed upon us by others, and inspires us to rewrite our own destinies. If Clara can stand tall in the face of cruelty and find her voice, so can we all. If you found this story stirring and uplifting, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps keep these empowering stories alive. Thank you for being part of Clara's incredible journey, and remember, your strength can light the path for others.